Hello everyone and welcome to today's learning session, the System of Environmental Service Incentives in the State of Acre, Brazil, organized by World Wildlife Fund's Forest and Climate Program. Thanks for taking the time to join us. My name is Breen Burns and I'm a Program Officer for Learning and Communications. Our main presenter today is Anthony Anderson, a Senior Specialist in Forest and Climate at WWF-Brazil. And we are also joined by Monica de los Rios, the Director of the Institute of Climate Change for the Government of Acre, Brazil. So before we begin, I'd like to share a few housekeeping tips and reminders. Today's presentation is being recorded, and you can access the recording within a few days on our YouTube channel. So to find the recording, simply go to youtube.com and search for WWF Forest and Climate, or go to our website, panda.org/forestclimate, and look for the REDD learning section. There are two audio options. You can listen via your computer speakers or dial in through the number that was provided in your registration email. It's important to note that if you experience audio difficulties while listening via your computer speakers, this is often caused by having too many software or internet applications open. So feel free to close some of them, and that usually solves the issue, or you are always welcome to join via phone. If you are having tech difficulties, please send me or Jenny Guzman a message via the chat area if possible, and we will try to get it sorted out. Questions are absolutely welcome. Please submit your questions for our presenters through the toolbar on your screen, and we'll answer as many questions as possible during our allotted time. For anything that we don't get to cover, you're invited to post them on our REDD Plus learning platform, reddcommunity.org. After the webinar, you'll receive a link to the place on REDD Community where you can post your questions, and we will also post a link to the recording of the session there so you can access it after today. Thanks again for joining us, and with that we will get started, and I will turn it over to Anthony. Anthony.
Hi, thank you, Breen. It's a pleasure to be here, and the topic of our presentation today is the System of Environmental Service Incentives in Acre, Brazil. Before beginning, I'd just like to mention the names of three people who either were in or are in the state government of Acre, whose collaboration with this study made it possible. And those people are Eufran Amaral, who is currently president of Embrapa in Acre, Monica de los Rios, who is joining us in this webinar, and Fabio Vaz. These three people played a key role in providing information for the study on which this presentation was based. The study was published in the middle of 2013. And it's one of the first external analyses of Acre State's very innovative program for REDD, which is known as ESA Carbon, the ESA Carbon program. That's Incentives for Environmental Services for Forest Carbon. Looking at this slide, there are a number of topics, a total of 6 topics that are covered in depth in this publication. I'm going to focus in this presentation on the last 3, which involve the strengths of the ESA Carbon program, its challenges, and some of the strategic lessons that can be applied for designing REDD policies and programs in other contexts. Next slide. Just to get a view of the state of Acre. Just some principles regarding WWF's vision for REDD. And I think, what I'd like to draw attention to in this slide is just the importance of scaling up. Obviously, when we refer to scaling up, we'd like to see that at a global level. But this is Acre's experience represents a very large-scale effort to make REDD a reality. over an area that's approximately equivalent to the area of the U.S. state of Florida or the combined areas of England and Wales. The next slide, please. Here, just a vision of the state of Acre and its position in South America and in Brazil. The state, as you can see, the eastern part of the state is where most of the deforestation has occurred historically, and there's a new highway crisscrossing the state, the BR 364, which was recently paved. This map shows particularly the indigenous lands, which are in yellow, protected areas, which are in various shades of green, and deforestation in red. Next slide. I'd like to provide some background about Acre's favorable political context, which is really a key strength of the ESA carbon program. And it's really been key, I think, for the favorable prospects regarding this program. Some background about Acre's history. I'm sure a lot of you know about Acre, but there may be some people in the audience who are less familiar with the state. Acre was the epicenter of a movement by forest dwellers throughout much of the Brazilian Amazon during the 1980s, and this movement was in opposition to widespread deforestation caused by the opening up of new highways. And the 1988 assassination of Chico Mendes, a rubber tapper and labor leader from Chapuri, Acre, led to the establishment of the first extractive reserves. These extractive reserves were a very innovative effort to combine environmental conservation with the well-being of forest populations. And by 2010, these extractive reserves covered 133,000 square kilometers in Brazil. Since 1999, the state of Acre has been governed by a political group that has strong links to the forest populations and the rubber tapper movement, and this group has designed various policies in support of environmental conservation, rational use of natural resources, reduction of poverty, and the development of a forest-based economy. As far as specific policies that support the ESA carbon program, these were pre-existing policies. The first of these is ecological economic zoning. This serves as a basic instrument for territorial management within the state. Acre was the first state to conclude its zoning, which is used to guide territorial management. And the process of developing the zoning was carried out in two phases. The second phase was concluded in 2006 with the participation of diverse interest groups in all of the state's municipalities. And the zoning zoning effort identified forest-specific zones at a scale of 1 to 25,000, including a zone for environmental protection and for forest management that covers about half of the state. The establishment, in addition to the ecological and economic zoning, Acre has established and particularly expanded in recent years its protected area system, which currently covers almost half of the state. Between 2004 and 2010, state conservation units in Acre expanded from 47,000 hectares to over 1.2 million hectares, or an expansion of over 25 times. In addition, the Acre government has established an extremely advanced forest monitoring system, which we will examine in greater detail below. It's provided strong support for a forest economy through concessions, minimum prices and investment in processing industries. Acre has pioneered forest concessions in Brazil. This began when the federal government devolved to the states the authority to manage public forests. And the first experience was established in 2005 in the state forest of Antimari. And the profits used from the forestry operations are the profits used from auctions of the harvested timber are used to support forestry operations, which are managed by the state, and they also provide funding and support for local communities that live in the public forest. The government also has policies in support of major non-timber forest products, including rubber and Brazil nut. In both cases, the government has invested in processing industries for these products to provide value added within the state. Finally, the state government has provided incentives to small-scale producers who adopt socio-environmental practices. And these incentives include technical assistance, access to credit, and a financial bonus for properties that are certified as having adopted sustainable land use practices, such as reduced deforestation and burning. Acre still possesses over 86% of its original forest cover, and since 2004, its deforestation rate has dropped substantially, achieving the lowest rates during 2007 to 2012. And the high forest cover, and particularly the drop in deforestation, are probably a reflection of the wide range of policies that the state government has implemented. Next slide, please. So thinking about strengths, there's another key strength of the ESA carbon program, which is that the program was developed before specific REDD projects. This is in sharp contrast with the vast majority of REDD experiences documented worldwide. And for example, in the neighboring regions of Madre de Dios and Cusco in Peru, there are a dozen REDD projects underway and in various stages of design. And the lack of a common baseline or the prior establishment of official regulatory agencies for these projects within the regions could lead to future problems in the accounting and recognition of reduced emissions. Acre's unusual approach to REDD, in which the program was established before projects, should avoid such risks. Next slide, please. Another strength of the ESA carbon program is its ambition. The program encompasses the entire state, 164,000 square kilometers, which, as I mentioned before, is roughly equivalent to the U.S. state of Florida. And it plans to benefit all components of the rural population. These include indigenous peoples, inhabitants of extractive reserves, small-scale producers in agrarian settlement projects, and large-scale property owners. And the program could potentially benefit up to 30,000 rural households, and this would make it one of the largest REDD plus regimes in the world. Next slide. Another strength of the ESA program, really the fourth that we identified in the study, involves Acre's advanced monitoring system. Now, in Brazil, the standard program used to monitor forest cover is called PRODES, and it has a minimum resolution of 6.25 hectares. But in Acre, approximately 80% of the polygons with deforestation are under 5 hectares in extent, and this implies that a higher resolution is required. And so the Acre state government has invested in the establishment of an advanced forest monitoring system, that can detect polygons with deforestation as small as 0.54 hectares. And this permits monitoring of virtually all the deforestation that is occurring in the state. In addition, agrarian settlement projects are by far the most critical foci of deforestation in Acre. The deforestation rates in these projects are 30 to 40 times higher than in indigenous lands or extractive reserves. And at present, about 50% of the properties in agrarian settlement projects are georeferenced. This is an extremely labor-intensive effort, but there's been considerable progress in this area. And the Acre forest monitoring system is currently gearing up capacity to monitor forest degradation. And it goes without saying that an advanced monitoring system contributes to the transparency and the credibility of the ESA carbon program. Next slide. A fifth strength that we've identified of the program is the fact that it was formulated by way of highly consultative processes. The program's technical components were developed during a broad consultative process that was considered unprecedented by some of the participants. And these technical components focused primarily, these technical components that were developed through the consultative process were focused primarily on defining how the program would operate. In other words, a target, the baseline, the benefit sharing arrangements that would be appropriate for different segments of the rural population, and finally also small-scale producers. In addition, there was to these consultations, well, the consultations included 5 meetings to inform local civil society organizations about the preparation and design of the program. There were also 3 three-day workshops to build capacity among representatives of the main beneficiary groups, indigenous peoples, inhabitants of extractive reserves, small-scale producers. A document summarizing the design of the program was mailed to 72 national and international organizations to request feedback and recommendations. There was a 3-day technical seminar bringing together experts from 10 national and international organizations and 7 state secretariats. There were 5 sectoral meetings with representatives of large-scale producers, small-scale producers, and governmental organizations. And that's a lot of information, a lot of consultation, but basically this process generated 357 recommendations to improve the program's design. And after these consultations, a law establishing the program was passed by the state legislature in late 2010 by a huge margin. And local actors observed that the ease by which this law passed was at least in part attributable to the broad consultative process that it contributed to its formulation and had increased thereby its legitimacy. Next slide. Linkages to larger policy frameworks, another strength of the ESA Carbon program. The target of the program is identical to the target adopted by the Brazilian federal government for the Amazon region, which is to reduce emissions from deforestation by 80% in relation to the 1996-2005 baseline. And Acre has reached 63% of this target during 2006 through 2012, reducing emissions by 97 metric tons of CO2. While deforestation has increased during 2013, the state is nevertheless well on track to achieving its target, and to contributing to achieving the overall target established by the Brazilian federal government for the Amazon region. In addition, the program is part of a system of environmental services incentives, CISA, which was established simultaneously with the program and which, in addition to forest carbon, intends to develop methodologies for valuing such services and values as social and biological diversity, hydrological resources, climate regulation, and cultural traditions. Finally, next slide, the credibility of the program is another strength that we observed, and this credibility is enhanced by the advanced monitoring system that we mentioned before. It will also be strengthened through the use of the most recognized systems for validation and certification of reduced emissions, which are VCS and CCBA. Acre was also chosen to be part of a select group of 4 countries and 2 subnational jurisdictions that are developing CCBA standards at national and subnational scales. And together with Chiapas, Mexico, Acre was the second jurisdiction which was chosen to pilot a new cap-and-trade program with California, and it's exploring similar opportunities with other Brazilian states. By the end of 2012, the ESA carbon program had attracted 107.7 million reais. That's approximately, at the time, equivalent to 52.5 million US dollars in external financing. And this financing primarily came from the Amazon program and KfW. And at the moment, the financing could be considered entirely in the form of donations and mostly from public agencies. However, the financing from KfW, Monica will provide further details about this later, could be considered a kind of voluntary market scheme for carbon. And in that sense, it could be characterized as something different from a conventional donation. It is anticipated that the program will attract private sector investment in the future. And several studies, including this one by WWF, consider the ESA carbon program to be the world's most advanced jurisdictional REDD+ program. What about the challenges of this program? One of the key challenges is how it can be compatible with a national REDD strategy for Brazil, which is still under development. The current rules of the game are expressed in terms of baseline and target in the graph to your left. That graph shows that the baseline shifts every 5 years, and with reduced deforestation, the lines show what the baselines are for Acre. 602 kilometers squared up until 2010, 496 kilometers squared of deforestation per year between 2011 and 2015, and 264 kilometers squared between 2016 and 2020. By the end of this period at 2020, the deforestation would be 20% that of what it had been at the original period in which the original baseline was based, which is between 1996 and 2005. This is a scheme that was defined by the Brazilian government, but the state governments of the Amazon, and there are 9 of them in Brazil, have proposed a different scheme in which the baseline would not shift every 5 years. this would then actually enable the state of Acre to achieve a much greater amount of reduced emissions. Instead of 153 metric tons of CO2 that would be predicted under the existing scheme, it could be as high as 251 metric tons of CO2. As I mentioned, all of the Brazilian states are lobbying for this change in the methodology. So there are some issues having to do with the compatibility with the national REDD system that still need to be worked out. Next slide. Now, the design of the environmental service incentives is still a bit of an open question in terms of the ESA carbon program. Initially, the program had defined a pretty detailed approach to the incentives for different interest groups within the state, but once it became time to implement the program, the government decided that less detail was probably better. And so the program, the detail regarding the design of environmental service incentives was reduced primarily to increase the flexibility in the program's implementation and its ability to respond to changing geographic and temporal conditions. And while such flexibility seems to be necessary, the program certainly needs more information on which to base decisions about how to maximize the efficiency and effectiveness of the incentives that it will provide. And just as one example of this, there was a model that was developed during the formulation of the program in which basically it was developed by PALM, and it was able to identify areas within the state that would provide the greatest returns in terms of forest carbon, and while also minimizing the costs of implementation. And in a sense, this modeling was able to identify win-win scenarios in terms of areas that could be prioritized for implementing the program. And this or some other kind of approach would be very useful in terms of prioritizing how the program is implemented. We understand, however, that flexibility is needed, and the program does need to be responsive also to the demands of different investors. But more information can be quite useful. The third challenge regarding the program has to do with the management model that was adopted. And essentially, within this scheme, there are two main organizations, the Climate Change and Environmental Services Regulatory Institute, IMC, and the Environmental Services Development Company. These are the two key entities that are carrying out the bulk of the work under the program. IMC is primarily involved in establishing the rules of the game and regulating the program, and the CDSA will be involved in handling the program financing and attracting private sector investments. But in addition to these two entities, and I believe now in contrast to how this is shown, the CDSA has been established. It's shown here with a dotted or a separate line, but it's now been established. We believe, though, that, well, there are quite a few additional entities that were established to monitor the functioning of the program and to provide technical advice. These include the State Committee for Validation and Monitoring, SEVA, a scientific committee, These include, up on the upper right, a council, a state council, a forest council that helps to minister to guide the application of a forest fund. And it just, there are a lot of different entities that are responsible for social control. It's important to maintain the transparency of the program, but our concern is that this institutional arrangement might be a bit cumbersome and could undermine the efficiency of the operations of the program. Strategic lessons. REDD is not an island. It needs to be part of a larger framework of supporting social and environmental policies. And within Acre, the ESA carbon program was conceived within a context, as we've seen, of a very rich context of governmental policies designed over the preceding 12 years to conserve and value forests and promote the well-being of forest populations. So the success of this program would be much less likely outside of this supportive political context. And I think that's a really important lesson for designing REDD policies and programs in other contexts. REDD will not succeed if it just drops out of the sky. It really has to be part of a supportive policy framework. In addition, REDD is not a silver bullet for reducing deforestation. Other incentives are required to value the services that forests provide. And the Acre state government is aware of this and perceived from the start that REDD, with its focus on forest carbon, is essential but insufficient. The valuation of other environmental services such as biodiversity and hydrological services is critical if the conservation and sustainable use of forests is to compete effectively with conventional land uses such as cattle ranching. And so as a result, the ESA carbon program was integrated from the start within a larger institutional framework, the System of Environmental Service Incentives, SESA. In addition, REDD regimes should be compatible at local, subnational, and international scales. This is, sort of in an ideal world, REDD regimes would be established first at a global level and progressively at finer scales to ensure compatibility. But in the real world, the opposite seems to be the case. REDD projects are frequently developed within political jurisdictions that don't have baselines, official institutions, or policy frameworks. In Acre, the state government avoided these risks by defining a statewide REDD regime prior to initiating local level projects. And that regime is compatible with the baseline and target defined by the federal government for the Amazon region as a whole. And this approach greatly reduces the risk of double counting of reduced emissions. Nevertheless, the lack of a defined REDD plus strategy for Brazil, as well as an international framework, could create future challenges for the ESA carbon program. These challenges have to do with the authority, which entity has authority over emissions reductions. That hasn't been defined how that authority will be divided up between different governments at different levels, federal, state, municipal, and other interest groups as well. It hasn't been defined whether carbon credits can be commercialized. There's still considerable debate about this within Brazil. And also, as mentioned before, a third issue involves adjusting the current methodology for defining baselines between 2006 and 2010. In addition, it's really important. The issue of incentives is perhaps the core challenge for REDD, and how to design incentives that are both efficient and effective. While the details of how these incentives still remain to be defined, the ESA has already established some guiding principles in this area, or a couple of them at least. First, the incentives will not consist of direct payments for environmental services, but rather investments in the transformation of production systems. And second, the incentives contemplated could include financing to support initiatives designed to promote conservation and sustainable resource use, institutional strengthening, and technical assistance and rural extension. However these incentives are designed, they will require considerably more information about natural resource use among the populations targeted under the ESA carbon program. Finally, participatory processes have been shown by the Acre experience to really be critical. And Acre's experience also shows that such processes should permeate all phases of design and probably implementation as well, although that's outside of the scope of this study. The process of consultation should involve representatives of all the beneficiary groups contemplated, in addition to other interest groups. Participatory processes generate valuable recommendations for the design and implementation of REDD regimes and contribute to their legitimacy among different sectors of society. And that brings to an end my presentation. I'd like to pass the ball, as we say in Portuguese, on to Monica de los Rios, who would like to provide an update on information regarding the ESA carbon program. Monica?
Yes, thank you, Anthony. And I appreciate this opportunity to join you in this webinar, and thank you for this very useful book that also brings to us some outside view in order to improve also the policies that we are adopting in the state of Acre in order to establish a REDD regime. First, I would like to clarify one point in the presentation is we enjoyed the initiative, the international initiative of social and environmental standard for REDD Plus. That is not a CCB standard. It's another independent initiative where organizations that participate or are part of the CCB also are involved in this process, in this initiative. But it's a different, it's totally different from CCB. But as you say, as you said, Acre is one of the states that together with Ecuador and other jurisdictions, we are trying to use this initiative in order to institutionalize a process to implement or practice safe social and environmental safeguard and how to monitor it. Then I would like to complement your presentation, because after this book, we obviously continue evolving the process to design the elements that and the features of this program in the state of Acre. And obviously, as you said, one of the challenges of the state, or at this level, at subnational level, is to maintain the accountability at national level. And the idea is to, in the future, be integrated to the national strategy. One of the instruments that we could use in order to maintain the accountability and to be integrated in a national strategy is use the same way to define the reference level, the same source of information to monitoring the activities as deforestation, in order to avoid any kind of inconsistency between the process of monitoring or the accountability of the emission reductions. This is why, consider that we have in our plan of prevention and control deforestation a target of reduction deforestation until 2020. And this target was established considering three different reference levels. And this was established following the National Plan of Climate Change, that at that moment when we developed the plan of prevention and deforestation, defined this kind of methodology. Three different reference levels, one lower than the previous one, and our plan needed to follow it. So at the first stage of the process of designing the program, we considered this. But after the publishing of our plan, the national government established the target and the way to define the reference level as a plain line until 2020. And this was established by decree. So we needed to adapt our reference level to that context. But we consider as well that have a plain line between 2006 to 2020 is too much to account the emission reductions in order to thinking in that circumstances could change. So we define two periods in order to establish the reference level. The first period previous of the law of CISA, between 2006 to 2010, with the reference level consider the period of 1996 to 2005, and then a second period between 2011 to 2020 after the law of CISA, in order to define the average of using the average of deforestation from the previous 10 years, so since 2001 to 2010. And this is why we use two reference levels, one for each period, and in order to attain what is in our plan of prevention of deforestation, and to attain also what is in the national decree. And it's like a intermediate approach that we adopt, considering the recommendation that we received from our scientific committee. Also, the source of data that is used is the national program of monitoring deforestation in Amazonia, that is PRODES. It is beside the National Institute for Spatial Research, INPI, and they are responsible for the official data of deforestation in order to maintain the comparability between the states and how we can achieve the targets that we put in our plan of prevent deforestation, and in order to use a way to demonstrate to the national government that we are contributing to the national strategy to achieve the national targets, we will continue use this source of data of monitoring deforestation. But as also Anthony said, that we have a state system for monitoring deforestation that is based on high-resolution image. This monitoring is to use in order to design the intervention inside of the state, to design the policies for investment inside of the state, consider that we have data at local level that could help plan better our strategy to prevent and control the deforestation inside of the state. Regarding to benefit sharing, all providers of environmental services are included in this benefit sharing. So not just who avoid deforestation, but also considering the effort to conserve the forest. And this will be operationalized through the policies to promote sustainable economic development that we already implement since many administrations before the current administration in the state. And there are other activities that are implemented as a complement of the previous policies. Then the financing, as Anthony said, is based at the moment in public money. So the first was Amazon Fund, not directly to the design or implement the program, but to establish the needs and the infrastructure and the improve the efficiency of the institutes that are responsible for control the activities inside of the state, in order to be able to generate emission reductions at national, subnational level, at the state level, and then became the KfW REM program that is a way of payment for a jurisdictional performance. In the case of Acre, was regarding of 4 million tons of reductions of emission reduction from deforestation between 2011 to 2015, and and was established a price for $5 per ton. And this will be part of our accountability, how much we are transacted at the moment. The other thing that I will clarify, that update you, that as we are at the moment doing this kind of financial cooperation or transaction, a kind of transaction, we're also working with market environmental registry in order to control what we are doing with the emission reductions, in order to maintain the control while we don't have a national system of registry. The idea is to have all the instruments to avoid any kind of double accounting and double selling as well. This was I have at the moment. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. So thanks again to Monica and Anthony for that great presentation. And at this point, we will open up the floor to questions. To submit your questions, you can click on the question section of your toolbar and type them in, and we will answer as many questions as we have time for today. One question that we have had is whether or not This recording will be available, and if people can have a copy of the presentation, and the answer is yes to both of those, we will post them on REDD Community, and you'll receive a link in the follow-up email to the page on REDD Community where you can find those. So our first question is for Anthony, and this is from Adam. And Adam asks, you mentioned that there is still debate about whether carbon rights can be commercialized. Given that Acre is going down a VCS jurisdictional program route, what would this mean for credits generated under that approach? Anthony, do you want to take that one?
Yes. Well, I just think in terms of credits, there's just a lot of debate within Brazil about this. There's been particularly some opposition within certain sectors of the government about carbon credits and commercialization of carbon related to REDD and also offsets. That being said, I think the reality is moving forward so quickly in the states, particularly the states of the Amazon, Acre being at the forefront, but also Mato Grosso, Amazonas, that simply, whatever kinds of questions that are being raised are simply going to be resolved, and markets are going to appear regardless of whatever position might be taken. It would be, I think, very important as part of the definition of a national REDD strategy for Brazil that this point be clarified at the moment. In the current draft, the latest draft of this strategy, it still remains an open question. So it still remains contentious within Brazil. There have been some legal papers produced analyzing the question and determining that there is a legal basis for such commercialization. So my sense is that the issue is going to become moot very soon.
Great, thank you. And our next question is more of a clarification question, but Eric asks, the amount of carbon being reduced is expressed as units, like 153 metric tons. That's a very small amount of carbon. Do you mean this much per square kilometer?
It's million tons.
Million tons.
Million tons.
Correct.
Okay, MT.
Yeah.
Great, I think that clarifies that. So the next question is from Tom, and Tom asks, will all emissions reductions be sold centrally by the jurisdictional authority, or will project-level entities be permitted to make sales directly against a portion of the overall provincial baseline? So I'll open that up to either of you.
Yeah, I think that I can answer it, Anthony.
Please.
Okay. Yes. This is a law also allow private landowners to have their own projects in their lands. So it's not private projects in other kind of land. They can have their private projects, and they need to follow some criteria that they need to attend and to prove the state of the situation of the land and prove the ownership of the land to the state, and or how is the relationship between the proponent and the owners of the land. And this, at the moment, we already have 4 private projects in the state of Acre. I officially have 3 with in official process of pre-registry. That is the moment of present the documentation that they have to prove that. And but any of those projects is still inside of the system because they need to attend the requirements, but are in the process of adaptation or attend the recommendation that we already sent to them. And obviously, obviously this part of the projects in the global account of the state, we will separate or amount that could be achieved by private lands that we see that could have private projects, because it's not every private project that could have the conditions to have a private project, because the size or because the many things that are decided.
Great, thank you. And another question we've seen a few people ask is, we've referred throughout this presentation to a book or report, and people are asking what report is this or what book is this? And the report is the title of this session, which is the System of Environmental Service Incentives in the State of Acre, Brazil. And again, you'll receive a link in the follow-up email to a place where you can find that report in both English or Portuguese. So stay tuned for that. You can also find it if you go to our publications page, which isn't listed here in the REDD resources, but you'll be able to click through very easily and find it. So moving on, the next question comes from Anna, and Anna asks, how long will investment need to continue to ensure that the climate benefits are permanent? So I will let either of you pick that one up.
Okay, maybe this is on mine, Anthony, because I am representing the state and the needs of the state. Thinking in the needs that we have, we need to consider first that in order to be permanent, it means sustainable. And in order to be sustainable, we need to create the conditions that in a future moment we don't need more of this money, because there are other things that are implemented or established or are so natural that continue the process and this became permanent. When we design our plan for prevent and control deforestation, and we put all of the things that we needed in order to implement our zoning. That means conserve the forest, improve the efficiency on the production zone, consolidate the economy of the state based also on forest, that could be timber or not. We make a previous budget in order to see how much how much money we will need. The previous budget, obviously, with the policies that we implemented at that moment, included future activities, was approximately $4 million. This is too high, but we are talking about of a state, and we are talking about of establish a new kind of economic model. And this is why REDD is not, we are not considered as the only one solution, but a part of the solution. There are other kind of investment that will be needed that need to complement the REDD Plus. But obviously, the REDD Plus money that could come through REDD could be the, Anthony, help me, I don't know how to say, o catalisador de outros recursos. Como que eu falo isso? Anthony?
Used to leverage more resources.
Exactly. So I cannot see for how long I will need this REDD money, but we already, as at national or subnational level, the money that comes and the investment that is needed is in order to establish another way of economic growing that could consider the conservation of natural resources in order to continue move on in the future, and without depend on the deforestation, as for example. If we could achieve this, and this is not easy, we take at the moment 14 years in order to have the conditions now to implement a REDD program. So for more 15 years, I cannot see I cannot see the future. But if the money could be used in the right policies to promote and consolidate policies that we already saw that are give us good results, because at the moment our indicators of economic growing show us that we can continue grow without deforestation, is probably more 15 years for us, because it's something that needs to be consolidated, and in the future we don't need more this kind of money in order to establish the order in the state to use the natural resources on this space.
Wonderful, thank you. And so we have a ton of questions, so thank you to everyone for submitting those questions, but I do know that we have come to the end of our time here, so I have one just quick question that that I think Monica or Anthony can answer very easily, and then what we will do is after this we'll take the questions that were submitted and we will work to get written answers of those, and we'll post those on REDD Community. So again, everything that you're asking and looking for is available on the REDD Community page, and you'll receive a link to that in the follow-up email. So it's reddcommunity.org, and then you'll click through to the section where we have this information. But as a last question, Hillary asks, is a copy of Brazil's national REDD strategy publicly available? Do you know that, Anthony?
Sorry?
Is a copy of Brazil's national REDD strategy publicly available?
There are not national strategy for REDD at the moment. It's in the way of development, and the federal government also discussed with the states, the Amazon states, through a task force the last year. But at the moment, we don't have a national strategy established. We have a national plan for climate change that established the reference level to define the target of the reduction on deforestation and the targets of the emission reduction, but it's not national REDD strategy at the moment.
Okay, thank you for
clarifying. Just one clarification.
Yes, please.
The federal government recently set out to selected organizations or selected stakeholders a draft, which I believe is one of maybe the fourth or fifth draft of its strategy. And there was a very quick turnaround time over the holidays in which we were to provide comments, which we did extensively. But it's clearly quite a ways from finalization.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. So as we wrap up, again, we will try to get written answers. We'll work on that over the next week or so from Anthony, and we'll post those online on REDD Community. And in the meantime, here are some additional WWF REDD resources that you can use to learn more. And then this final slide here, as we come to a close, is some other ways to stay connected with us. You can follow us on Twitter. You can visit the website, and you can also email us if you need additional information. And with that, I'd like to thank you again for attending today. We hope to see you at the next session, and I will bring us to a close. Thank you so much to Anthony and to Monica and to all those who attended, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.